That'd do me.
Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again, and welcome to Evil Dead October, where we're going through the entire Evil Dead franchise, all 3 movies, and all 3 seasons of the show. Today we are going to be taking a look at and discussing Ash vs. the Evil Dead, Season 1.
Honey, I'm home.
Ash vs. the Evil Dead originally premiered in 2015 on the Starz channel with a pilot that was directed by Sam Raimi. The first season has a cast which includes Bruce Campbell, Ray Santiago, Dana DeLorenzo, Lucy Lawless, and Jill Marie Jones. Ash has spent the last 30 years avoiding responsibility, maturity, and the terrors of the Evil Dead until a deadite plague threatens to destroy all of mankind, and Ash becomes mankind's only hope. Right on, guys, so Ash vs. the Evil Dead was something I was definitely looking forward to, especially after the first trailers for it came out, because, like many Evil Dead fans, I didn't hate the remake, but it definitely didn't quench my Evil Dead thirst, and so seeing the prospect of this show, with Bruce and with Sam and with all these people originally tied to the original franchise, coming back to work on it, it seemed like this was definitely going to be what we wanted, and what we needed. So let's dive into a few different aspects of this first season and figure out if it really was or not. Alright, so let's talk about the writing in this first season. Overall, with a few exceptions, I feel that the writing is really solid, and that they really managed to capture the tone and feel that we all associate with the Evil Dead franchise, despite the fact that each of the Evil Dead films have completely different tones and are almost in completely different genres. So that in of itself is a grand feat. I also felt that most of the characters of our main cast in this season were written fairly well and serviced the function of the story throughout the season very well. The things that I would say on the downside of this is that in this first season, a lot of the writing is very episodic, which isn't necessarily a problem, but considering we've always had Evil Dead in movie form and they don't have a lot of room to kind of further develop or expand on the mythology, it's kind of something that I think all of us were really wanting. In this first season, while they introduce a lot of new elements, they don't really do a lot to really connect all the different pieces and like expand the mythology in that way. However, the things they did add were absolutely awesome. My other big issues in terms of the writing with this actually have a lot to do with just the production side of things. So they, for various reasons, could not get the rights to use things like S-Mart or pretty much any of the events or props or any of that kind of stuff from Army of Darkness. So for the most part, this first season and the following seasons just kind of ignore those. Now, the big issue with this is that in traditional Evil Dead fashion, I suppose, when we start the show out, it doesn't actually line up with where we last saw Ash. Now, it is assumed that the show begins after the ending of Army of Darkness, the theatrical cut. That makes the most sense. But really, like, the implication in this show is that Ash really hasn't had to deal with the evil since he came back from the cabin or that whole experience. So I don't actually think the ending of Army of Darkness happens in this universe. So I think this is, again, it's one of those things where either he's in an alternate dimension, it's an alternate version of Ash, or it's just the same that Evil Dead has always had to do, where like when they always have had to recap the opening and the backstory in each movie, it's never quite lined up. So it's something that I can forgive and get past pretty easy, but it is a pretty big glaring plot hole, especially later on in the series when they do start trying to connect more things and pull more things together. But yeah, overall, those things, I understand them. They didn't, for me, detract away from how good the show is. I just kind of wish we'd gotten a little bit more into the kind of mythology of the Evil Dead.
Everybody dies here. It's just a rule. Death, taxes, more death, and I don't pay taxes, so all I know is death.
So as for the general production of the show, again, it's pretty solid on this front. The show really does feel like it takes place in a consistent universe. Everything is competently shot. The lighting is good. They always really visually capture the kind of mood that you want to go for with this kind of storytelling. And it definitely still overall feels like Evil Dead for the most part. However, I will say that outside of the first episode and a few others, including the final episode, the visual style of Evil Dead is not really here. This is definitely Evil Dead on a TV time schedule, it feels like, where they don't really have time to do all the crazy experimental things that Sam would do, like you see him do in the pilot of the show. Some of the episodes are much more just like, okay, here's a fucking cool shot, now let's get in, let's get this stuff knocked out, and let's move on to the next scene. Because that's what you have to do when you're doing a TV show. So in that respect, while the show always looks good, it never looks like people were negligent or people didn't know what they were doing, and the feel is consistent for the most part. Like, whenever we do have really heightened things with the evil, there is a different mix of styles utilized, but I find that that also shifts given what they're fighting. If they're fighting a Deadite, it doesn't visually look the same as if they're actually fighting a different demon pulled forth from the book. So in that respect, it kind of works for the show, but again, it doesn't really feel visually like Evil Dead, which is kind of an issue for me. The other thing that I will say, again, consistency is important in a show. For me, it's actually more important that the show is consistent and has a consistent universal feel to the world it's depicting than that it is exactly like Evil Dead. So they did a good job in that, and one of the things that also makes it not feel like Evil Dead but works within the show is the CGI elements. Because again, there's a lot of crazy things they want to do, and some of that you can only do with CGI. And when you think of Evil Dead, CGI is just not something that you think of. However, when they do use the CGI, it looks good enough. It looks serviceable enough. It is a little silly in places, but again, that does go in with this new Evil Dead aesthetic that they're doing on the show, which is Evil Dead on TV. That's what we're watching, that's what we got, and I'm happy with it.
What, you never saw a guy with a chainsaw hand before?
So, as for the characters in the show, as I said in the writing portion, the characters are all pretty much written pretty well, at least to the point of servicing the story and the function for which their characters were created, with one notable exception that we'll get to at the end of this segment. But let's start off with Ash. So, in my opinion, Ash in this show is done pretty much perfectly. Now, he does feel like a blend of Ash from Evil Dead 2 and Ash from Army of Darkness, kind of mixed together and synthesized into like the perfect version of that character, because honestly, in Evil Dead 1, while I really enjoy Bruce in that movie, that character is very underwhelming. Like, his main attribute is how much damage he takes and how much torment he goes through, and that kind of like gives them the ability to alter his character in the second movie and be like, well, after you went through that, you'd be a totally different person. And that's true. And that development continues in this show. So I do like the fact that, like, he feels exactly like the guy that we left off, but kind of a blending of the two. I really enjoy that, and I feel that the writing for him is absolutely fantastic, and Bruce Campbell, as always, just knocks it out of the park at every turn. So yeah, Bruce Campbell as Ash, frickin' dope. For the new characters that they've introduced, I also really enjoyed them, for the most part. Pablo, he is definitely good at the kind of pathetic comedic relief type character that they're going for. At the same time, Kelly is awesome as like the female badass, because within the Evil Dead franchise, we've never really had that before. Like, we've had a few decentish female characters, you know, if you count, you know, the Nobi's daughter in the second movie, but like, she doesn't get a whole lot to do, and with Kelly there, we finally get like a female character who can actually stand like shoulder to shoulder with Ash and kick some ass, and that's really dope. And then the trio of them together, like just the comedic timing that they have between them really, really works, and I also buy the idea that like these kids who are kind of misfits, Ash would kind of form a begrudging bond with them. And I really appreciate that aspect of it. The one character who I do overall enjoy, but I don't feel is executed quite that well, is the character of Ruby. So Ruby's introduced as like the Nobi's daughter, but then she gets turned into a Deadite, and then she gets burnt, and then she comes back, and turns out in the twist that she's like the person who wrote the book. I'm not going to debate, like, how that all, like, the transfer, and, like, was she always the person who wrote the book, or was she really the Nobi's daughter? I'm not even going to go into that, but it just, within the course of the show, it doesn't really feel very developed. It just feels like, oh, we're doing this with her now, and we're doing this with her now, and we're doing this with her now. As if, like, every few episodes, they would change what the intent of her character was meant to be, to the point that, like, when we finally get to that turn at the end of the season, it doesn't really feel organic. It works well enough in terms of the plot, and, like, for things like that, we've learned to give Evil Dead a lot of leeway, so it does play, but I don't feel like it is as well done or as organic to the overall flow of the season arc as some of the other characters are. But yeah, overall, the characters in the show, even the little side characters, I enjoyed all of them, and I thought they were all really well written, and they all serviced the individual episodes they were in very well. Ruby was kind of, for me, the only thing that was a little bit, yeah, but, you know, we'll talk more about that as we go into further seasons.
First thing I gotta do is see a guy about a book. There must be some spell I can say to undo all this. The other first thing I gotta do is some cardio, because my heart is jackhammering like a quarterback on prom night.
Alright, so next let's talk about the ending of the season, because I know this has been a pretty divisive ending. I know there have been a lot of fans who have really enjoyed it, and there have been a lot of fans who have really hated it, but I have to say that for me personally, this ending is fantastic. I do have to admit that, like, I wasn't totally crazy about some of the elements of, like, them cutting the face off the book and it going on Pablo and, like, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't super crazy about that, but it still worked in context of the show for the most part, and the actual ending of Ash making the deal, for me, is actually kind of perfect. Now, again, if you're talking about Ash from Evil Dead, or if you're talking about Ash from Evil Dead 2, no, that's not who his character is. But if you're talking about Ash from Army of Darkness, and as we've established, he's a combination of those various forms of the character, like, that is all the way Army of Darkness Ash, where he would definitely take the deal that got him the high life, as long as it meant that he could, like, live good and not have to see the badness going on and could just ignore it and go fishing with both his hands, you know, and jerk off double-fisted. Like, he would do that in a fucking heartbeat, man, and we see him do it. In fact, like, for me, I was actually surprised that he held out as long as he did, but that's a testament to the writing in the show and how far they had developed his character from the person he was in Army of Darkness and the person he was at the beginning of the show to the person he is at the end of the season, where he does actually put up quite a bit of resistance, but in the end, he succumbs to, like, his worst nature, or the nature that has been established for him. And it allows us to give the season after this, like, a really wide palette. You can kind of go almost anywhere or do almost anything with it. So for me, I really loved the ending of this season, and it really capped off for me what was, in my opinion, exactly what I wanted out of an Evil Dead TV show, and exactly what I needed in terms of getting my Evil Dead fix. It had all the things that I wanted, some things that I didn't even know that I wanted, and the things that were in between, none of it was so bad that it made me want to quit on the show. So overall, I really, really enjoyed it. But let's talk about a few of the things that I absolutely love in the show.
Yo, Granny. Hope you took your Geritol. It's time to dance!
Alright, so I'm not going to go overboard, I'm just going to name off a few things here. Number one, at the end of the first episode, when Pablo, like, throws, whatever, he tosses Ash the chainsaw, and we have, like, the cheesiest, most ridiculous moment where the trailer becomes, like, an extra 10 feet long, and Ash jumps through the air and puts it on his hand, like Army of Darkness style, and then chops up the Grandma Deadeye. That is just the absolute perfect ending to a perfect first episode of this show. Whenever I got done watching that episode and it ended like that, I lost my frickin' mind. So yeah, I love that. Is just, that whole first episode is really solid, but that ending is just like what put it over the top for me. Of course, like, if that's what they had turned in as their, like, proof of concept, no duh, you're gonna get a show after that. That is dope beyond reason. So one of the other things that, again, I really, really enjoy in the show is the aspect of them kind of adding the Hefe mythology onto what we already have. Again, I said they don't really develop a lot of the mythology, and this is true with the Hefe thing too. They introduce it, but really, if they were doing this correctly, which later on they do kind of do in later seasons, the whole idea is that Ash already is this legendary warrior. He's in the Necronomicon as the guy who's prophesied to destroy the evil. That means that there is a prophecy about him that hasn't actually been fulfilled yet. Even if, like, in his perception at the time is that, well, I failed to destroy it, that he's still on the journey. So those two things come together and are actually part of the same mythology, and you can really use that to expand it and strengthen that whole idea. Again, like, I understand why they didn't go further with that in this first season, but I just love the fact that they're still playing on that idea. And I'm really, like, at the time of watching it, I was really interested to see where they were going to go with that. Another thing that I absolutely love in this show is pretty much, like, all of the stuff in the last couple of episodes where they go back to the cabin. Not just for the sake of nostalgia, but because it was so amazingly done. Like, the way they created that cabin and the way that it felt, even though there was a bunch of crap that, again, like, if the same ending to Evil Dead 2 happened, that cabin wouldn't even be there. Because in Evil Dead 2, we see it get sucked through the vortex, or at least, like, all the stuff inside of it get ripped out. You know? Like, this cabin's in really good shape, if that is something that ever happened at all, you know? So, it doesn't make sense, like, the freaking cellar door is no longer cut open. Like, maybe after Ash left and went back through time and stuff, someone came in and refurbished it. But it looks so great. Like, and those sequences that they have there and having Ash go back there and have to reconfront that stuff, it really, really works for me. I just absolutely adore that section of the show. It was great. And the final thing that I want to mention that I really, really did love, because I mentioned the digital effects a little bit earlier and said that some of them weren't so great, the practical effects in this show, this first season, and the show in its entirety, even the stuff where it's like an effect or a gag that I personally don't like because of taste reasons, they're all really well executed and really well done. Like, in terms of the practical effects in this show, it definitely lives up to the Evil Dead reputation and goes above and beyond. Like, there is gore and it all looks amazing.
You were right. No more running.
It's good to see you, Hefe.
Good to be back.
How does it feel?
Groovy.
All in all, guys, to close things out, I really did enjoy this season quite a lot. Like I said, it was what I wanted. It was what I needed out of Evil Dead. And I am still, with the show already gone, after only 3 seasons, I'm very happy that we got this. So, what did you think of Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 1? Let me know down in the comments below. And also, if you haven't checked it out, make sure and check out the other videos that we got coming out in Evil Dead October. Again, covering all 3 of the films and all 3 seasons of Ash vs. Evil Dead. We might also be covering the reboot. I don't know. We'll see how things go. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you think about this season? What do you think about the series as a whole? Have you watched the other Evil Dead videos? Do they suck or are they awesome? Let me know right down here. And if you like this video, then please leave a like and share it with some friends. Also, if you're not subscribed, then make sure to subscribe so you can check out all the dope content we got coming out, not only in Evil Dead October, but all year round. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you have a good one. Later, children of the screen. Nerd Scum, out.